started. Your attendees are now blah, 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 some kind of thing. And then after that little introduction from the automated system, be listening to you in whatever mode, blah, 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 blah.
We can hear you, Vince.
Mr. Allman, you have your microphone on. Do you want your microphone on?
Oh, I don't need it.
I'm gonna make sure, let's see, okay. Perfect. The only people's mics that are on, oh. John Stedman, I'm gonna mute you, or I think you beat me to it. Okay, Janine, it's 4 o'clock and I'm going to hit the start broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the July 23rd Fire and Police Commission meeting. I'd like to start by calling to order. Laura, will you please take roll call?
Yes. Chair Daniel.
Here. Here.
I got you. Just 1 second. I'm just unmuting. Vice Chair Stedman.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Here.
Commissioner Allman.
Here.
And Commissioner Peck.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, all duly noted. Agenda item number 3, changes to the agenda. Are there any at this time? Laura?
Commissioner Rodriguez here. I do have a addition or a question. On the February minutes, it said that we would be adding to the agenda somebody to appoint somebody to work with Attorney Doimus about updating the commission rules and regulations. And I noticed that isn't on our agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, it is under new business. I take that back. Okay, yes.
So at this time, there are no modifications to the existing agenda, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the meeting minutes from our last meeting on February 27th. I would like to make a motion to approve them. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye. 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 Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The next agenda item is public comment. I see that we have one attendee, Laura.
Yes, we do have an attendee, Miss Clara Hembry. If you're ready
Yes.
for her, I can unmute her and let her go forward.
Laura, before you unmute her, did she specify if she wanted to make a general public comment, or was it with regards to something specific on the agenda?
I do not see anything specific written as to what she wants to state, but also her hand currently isn't raised, so I would have to let her know that once I unmute her.
Okay.
Clara Hembry? Clara Hembry? Can you please unmute yourself? Clara Hembry?
Hi, sorry, it wasn't
Hi, that's
unmuting.
That's okay. You are able to do your public comment, and you currently have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I didn't have a comment actually. I was just joining in to listen in and listen to you guys go over the agenda items.
Okay, so we'll just continue to have you on mute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clara. But I would like to reiterate at this time that any member of the public may address the Fire and Police Commission, and we welcome participation by our community. So please keep that in mind. Okay, let's move on now to subcommittee reports. Commissioner Peck, you represent the Police Department. Do you have any update at this time?
I was able to speak with Captain Arroyo, and I don't want to step on any ground that Alex will share with us later today, but Captain Arroyo just wanted to say that the PD has been making steadfast efforts to resolve all issues that are happening nationwide, and that she feels that the community and the police department are supporting each other through this time. There has been no use of force within this time frame, and I will leave it to Alex to fill in the rest, but she is optimistic.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Allman, do you have any updates as far as the liaison with the fire department?
Here I am. I do not. I wanted to have a conversation with the chief, but I know he's really busy right now. Hopefully, there might be a couple of questions I can ask when we get to Chief Nickel.
Okay.
Would that be appropriate?
Yes, once he's made the presentation, I think that would be quite advisable.
Sure, thank you.
But also at this time, at our last meeting, you attended the CWPP meeting, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And the follow-up meeting was scheduled for April, I believe the 16th, but I'm assuming that that was canceled. Has it been rescheduled?
There was a webinar. I can't remember the date. They're currently working on that to finalize it. It should be, for people who don't know about the CWPP, it is a plan that's been worked on and reworked here locally for fire, wildland fire. The issue is now is that we're waiting for more public contacts and more comments from the public on what they've read on the website. Now the information is on City Fire's website about the CWPP. So I encourage anybody, especially the board, to have a look at that and review it and see how that might affect you, and then the public as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, do inform us at our next commission meeting. And also in light of the fact that we are now about to enter into our high fire season.
That's correct. That's a big concern, I know, for all the fire departments, and they've had to adjust, especially for out-of-town assignments and strike teams they send out. They're very concerned with how they protect their folks. So that's a big issue. I thought about it months ago when this first started, and those are conversations that I'd like to hear how they're handling it. But I'm a little afraid to interrupt the chief's day by asking him those questions, but I will make an effort to do just that.
Well, and I'd like to add on to that with respect to community outreach. It might be in the best interest of the areas that are in the high fire districts, the Eucalyptus Hill community, the Riviera Association. Perhaps you could reach out to them if they were interested in being an attendee at one of our next meetings to hear what the reports are about the plan for the high fire season.
Yeah, that can be done. And of course, as you know, I'm chair of the County Fire Safe Council, and our website is going to be up and running 100% here soon. And so I'll share that with all the members, and the rest of the community will see it too. But it's going to be addressing just those issues.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Any other comments at this time? Okay, let's move on now to old business. I'd like to open up the floor to the other commissioners. Well, on that note, I'd like to comment that there were a few issues that were discussed at our last meeting. I had brought up the fact of the Proposition 47 and how it was changing felonies to misdemeanors, and whether or not the effect on our community was in any way substantial. I would like to recommend at some point, once again, that it be agendized for down the road when we do have time, because we're trying to catch up on those months that the meeting was not held. The other request of the old business is, Laura, I don't remember receiving the 21st Century Policing Task Force report or the Recruiting Challenges report by the PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum. Would you please be so kind as to get those two reports and email them to all of the commissioners? I think it would be in our best interest that we all review those documents.
I will do that. Document
Thank
it.
you so much.
Can I, Commissioner Rodriguez here, can I add something to that, to your first request, Commissioner Daniels, is because we had a no bail policy during COVID, I think that the numbers might look differently. So that looking at Prop 47 and how that affects the local crime, I think would be different because we had the no bail policy. So I'm wondering if, in addition to that, or maybe it's a whole separate agenda item or report, but maybe having an update on how that no bail either affected positively or not, or negatively the crime rate in our community. It'd be interesting to see locally if we've seen recidivism.
Okay, very good.
Commissioners, Assistant City Attorney John Doimus. I don't know of any report yet fashioned by the police department. The issue again is providing to have someone provide the report and do the analysis and the data. Again, it's hard to do that during these times. If we have one and it's available and to provide it to the commission, then certainly we should recommend doing so. So I don't know yet if any report's been done on this issue yet from the police department. Again, it's a statewide issue, so we'd have to look to see how it affects us locally, and if we have even looked at that aspect of that issue. It doesn't really, it affects the crime issues statewide. I don't know if it affects administratively the police department, but if we have something into that issue, then police department can present it.
Okay, we can leave that discussion to down the road when things hopefully normalize within the near future.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doimus. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 9, new business. We have the subject of appointing a commissioner to work with the city's attorney's office to update the Fire and Police Commission rules and regulations for holding public meetings. And I'm going to open up the discussion to the other commissioners at this point. Any comments?
Commissioner Rodriguez here. I think that's a great idea, especially since there's discussion about implementing a community review board or civilian review board. It would be great to have a clear understanding of what the role of the Fire and Police Commission is and the responsibilities of the commissioner. Attorney Doimus did a wonderful summary at the city council meeting last Tuesday. So even just an updated version of that on our website would be great, and in our manual, if we had a manual.
Agreed. Well, first of all, we do have data, but it is unfortunately very out of date. I met with Commissioner Stedman and we discussed, and I distributed at a previous commission meeting, the fact that the wording needs to be changed. We just need to bring it into the new millennium because I don't believe it's been modified since 1989, if I have the date correct. And so on that note, because I have worked with Commissioner Stedman, I would like to make a motion that he be nominated the representative from the Fire and Police Commission to work with Mr. Doimus. Do I have a second? Or would you like to discuss or nominate other potential candidates?
Unless the vice chair has something else to say.
No, I do not, Max.
So Commissioner Stedman, are you interested in taking upon this role for the commission?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. I've been following John Doimus's work quite closely and have attended the city council meetings to see the development and discussion around some of the more current issues that Max was alluding to earlier and that John's working on currently. So I definitely have a high degree of interest in this subject.
Okay, so I have made a motion to nominate Mr. Stedman as the liaison. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those against? It's unanimous, Laura, for the record.
One thing that when Commissioner Daniels commission, one thing that would be helpful too is to, when we get assignments like this, to track this so we meet deadlines. I recommend that we come back 90 days with the revised report, so we at least set a deadline.
Perfect.
For that, so we'll do that then. Thank you.
Laura, will you note that within 90 days?
Yes, it's noted.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Do we have any other new business at this time?
Commissioner Rodriguez here, and as I mentioned earlier, the City Council approved to move forward with developing a blue ribbon committee to look at, explore, and plan for the implementation of a civilian review board process. So I think I would like to agendize the discussion to appoint a representative from the Fire and Police Commission and ask that this person be part of that blue ribbon committee.
Mr. Doimus, can you assist us on that? Are we in the power to request that we have a commissioner participate?
The ability, Madam Chair, Daniels, Commissioner Rodriguez, and the rest of the commission. In terms of power, you can't obviously mandate that, but what the commission can do is at least have a discussion and appoint someone and request that a representative be part of it. And so if council so chooses, or however that's going to develop. The issue is a little bit of timing. As we went to council on Tuesday, Mr. Colonna, Mr. Casey, the city administrator and city attorney, have been tasked with helping develop potentially processes to consider how to do such an outreach. So we don't know yet what that will look like in terms of how the formation. I know that there's some directives provided by council in terms of making sure it was local and making sure that's true representative of the entire community. And those are the two most important things that came out of this Blue Ribbon Committee, the edict that came out of that. So how that goes about yet, I'm not sure. They're coming back in 3 weeks. We may have time to put this on. What my consideration is, put this on the agenda to have a discussion. And if there is a type of large community input on how to appoint such or what model to use for a civilian review, the commission could certainly at least draft a letter asking and recommending to council that one member be appointed from the Fire Police Commission. And so if council chooses to take that up, then they can certainly do that. That's where the limitation is on that issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Then can we agendize it then, Laura, for the next meeting? So that a letter or a decision can be made to present to the mayor and city council.
Yes, it's on.
Thank you.
So for clarification, I'm just wondering, is it possible that in today's meeting that we could recommend a request and then at the next meeting, maybe we can vote for who that person might be?
No, it hasn't been agendized. So to have a
Okay.
discussion, deliberation on it would be a Brown
Okay.
Act violation.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the timing issue that you mentioned, but okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Oh, but Commissioner Rodriguez and other fellow commissioners, I'm hoping that city council and the mayor are watching our presentation as we speak. So hopefully they will know the message that we're trying to send out today.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, Mr. Doimus, just for clarification, following Commissioner Rodriguez, can we define what a blue ribbon committee is? And just to clarify, council and the mayor city hall just cleared a committee to think about putting together a committee, or okay, just making sure.
Correct. No committee, no model has been appointed about as a committee to look at what type of civil, to see if we need civilian review and what would be the best fit for the city, what type, and that's what this committee would look at to do outreach. And so a lot of cities, there's a mixture, and not to get too much into it to avoid a Brown Act violation, but some cities hire consultants, some cities do it locally, and they do surveys and outreach, community input. There's a whole host of ways to get feedback from the community on what is needed. So that's what's being done is how would this outreach look like? How would this blue ribbon outreach look like to see what would be needed going forward if civilian review exists.
Mr. Doimus, can you define blue ribbon for me?
It's just an ad hoc committee to kind of do, their purpose is for existence for one purpose, and then the purpose. So a lot of committees, for example, or maybe have multi-purposes or boards or commissions, for example. It has one distinct, it exists for one reason and one reason only. And once that reason, the objective is done, it ceases to exist. So that's what this blue ribbon committee would do.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions at this time?
Yes, this is Vice Chair Stedman. So I want to thank Assistant City Attorney Doimus for elaborating. There isn't anything close to being formed at City Council at this time, so we wouldn't be joining anything. Therefore, there's nothing to vote on at this point. There are some powers under Section 816, correct, Mr. Doimus? But I mean, that's an entirely different subject, and there is nothing formed by City Council. I just wanted to reiterate that.
Nothing besides a committee to look into
Right.
this issue. Correct. That's it.
For
Commissioners, any other
clarification,
comments?
though, that's the committee that I was hoping. I'm not intending that the Fire and Police Commission representative needs to be part of the Civilian Review Board once that's developed. I would like to request that the Fire and Police Commission be part of that blue ribbon committee to explore the development of this larger committee. So that part, yes, there is a committee set, but the members haven't been appointed yet to be part of that committee.
Correct. And we'll agendize it. I don't want to get into too much more discussion. For new business, it allows us flexibility to get clarification of what should be agendized, and so we'll agendize that appropriately to give. We have the marching orders from the commission, and we will agendize that appropriately to have the discussion that the objective that you want to at least accomplish for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doimus. So let's move on now to agenda item number 10, the monthly report by the Fire Chief, Chief Nickel.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the commission, Eric Nickel, your fire chief. And what a difference a few months has made since we last met. I've got several items that I'd like to cover today. I will start off with COVID-19. And, obviously this has impacted the city. It has impacted the community. It's impacted the globe. I'm going to focus on really a couple areas. First is some of the operations modifications that you'll see within the fire department. We have created plan upon plan. We've pivoted. We've created different plans. We've thrown a plan that was, 12 hours old out and created a new plan. But specifically with operations, some of the things that we're doing, when a customer calls 911, we've added some additional call screening questions with our 911 dispatchers to ascertain if somebody is potentially exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19. We have locked down all of the fire stations. We're treating them as a sterile environment, and we're trying to keep the crews together and as isolated as possible to minimize any sort of contact other than being on emergency calls. So some of the things that you'll see in the fire stations, we've suspended all of our public education programs. You'll see the doors closed quite frequently. In order to get into the fire station, the firefighters have to go through a self-screening in basically going from a dirty environment to a clean environment where they would take measure their temperature, their blood oxygenation levels, and they're taking a self-assessment healthcare screen before and during their shift. Fortunately, we've had a few false alarms with some of our firefighters who thought they may have been exposed, but at this point, we've had none of our line firefighters actually have an exposure. County Fire had, I believe, up to 8 of their firefighters currently have tested positive, and they have about 25 or 26 of them that had come in contact with these firefighters who did test positive that are currently in quarantine. So one of the reasons that I really believe that we're doing well is we jumped on this very quick, and we went out and we looked to see what are some of the best practices out there. We took one of our battalion chiefs, Battalion Chief Chris Males, who is our Emergency Medical Services Battalion Chief and Training Battalion Chief, and we said, look, all you're doing is COVID. You're not doing training anymore. You're not doing EMS. It's just COVID 100% of the time. He partnered with our medical doctor for the fire department, Dr. Jason Prostowski, who works at Cottage in the emergency department and is also a professor out at UCSB. And they have been working tirelessly, not just on behalf of the fire department, but really for the entire city. Our focus really has been on all the public safety employees across the city. So police officers, harbor patrol officers, airport patrol officers, and we're doing things that we haven't obviously done before, but we're working together collaboratively to try to keep everyone safe and healthy. And in that respect, we did take somewhat of a leadership role within the city and within the county with some of our COVID efforts. Some of the other things that you're seeing, you'll see our crews dressed in a different level of personal protective equipment, the gowns, the goggles, the masks. When we go to medical aid calls, calls are very different now. We try to get the patient to come outside into the fresh air to meet us instead of putting 3 firefighters and 2 ambulance folks from AMR in a small room. We call it 1 person in, crew out if we do have to go inside. So we're only sending 1 person in to make direct contact with the patient. We have had several patients that we've treated and transported to the hospital that did test positive for COVID. But if you follow the protocols that we have, and as long as we have our personal protective equipment on, it's not even considered an exposure. A low exposure would be if they didn't have a mask or something like that. But we've only had a few cases where we had anything sort of elevated other than kind of a low or a minor level exposure. Business modifications, you'll see. Commissioner Allman said he tried to come by and visit me one day, or he was dropping something off, but he had his mask on and he found out that our office was locked up. So, and I went out and didn't even recognize him because he had his mask on, and I think maybe sunglasses or something, I don't know. But You'll see that our administrative offices are closed. We're not allowing people access into the building. We've staggered the shifts of some of our administrative support personnel, so we don't have folks in a small area at the same time. We're doing as much remote and telecommuting work as possible for our non-essential employees. Our fire prevention folks have really pivoted to work from home and go out and do the fire inspections in the field and have maybe one fire inspector in the office one day at a time who would be the on-call fire inspector. The thing that we've been most concerned about related to COVID, and this isn't just our fire department, but we're seeing it across the country, the majority of exposures that are occurring with public safety folks are not occurring from a contact on a call. They're actually being exposed at a personal off-duty event. They're at a family event, they go out, they go to a wedding, that type of thing. And so we really tried to, instill in our firefighters that even when you're off duty, you still have to be very diligent about not, contracting COVID. We do, Dr. Jason does his every other Friday training seminar, webinar, much like this. It's a great way to end the week. Every other week, we make it available for all police and fire and public safety folks within the city. And Dr. Jason presents the latest information, the latest medical studies. He'll make some comment about this is an old medical study. It's 3 weeks old, because the information that is out there, and having a teaching physician on board the fire department as our medical director, we're getting the latest and greatest information out there. And I really attribute, another reason why we're not seeing a lot of exposures is we are getting, twice a month for at least an hour. So 2 hours a month, we're getting basically lectured from one of the best doctors in the area when it comes to COVID, and someone who's also on the front lines. The next thing I want to talk about related to COVID are some budgetary issues. And if you followed the budgetary process this year, when the economy shut down, two of our big three revenue sources also slowed down. So our transit occupancy tax and our sales tax dropped substantially. So we were initially directed by City Administrator Paul Casey, all departments to go back and look at a 5% budget cut for the proposed next year's budget. And most departments were able to do that. Fire came back in at about 2.5% of a cut. And the reason for that is almost 90% of our budget is people. And unless we start getting into a policy discussion with council, which we've not had, where they wanted a substantial cut that involved fewer people or service reductions, we're not to that point yet. But we did make some pretty substantial cuts within the fire service. We froze 2 vacant positions that were support positions, so they're not folks out performing work in the field. So one of the positions was an administrative support person that provided administrative support for the Fire Prevention Bureau. And then we had a logistics support person that handled, the delivery of supplies, hose, toilet paper, you name it, to keep, a $30 million a year organization going. He was the warehouse logistics person, and he would run that out. So we froze those positions, and the fire crews are picking up that extra work. Obviously we're keeping a close eye on the budget, and as we get, from my perspective, probably getting into late summer, early fall, if we still see our revenue sources not coming back, we're going to have to come back citywide, but certainly within police and fire, and take another look at possibly going, to a 10% cut. It's not all bad news with COVID. We've done some really cool things with some of our staff. I do want to highlight certainly Liliana. Liliana, she resides within fire, but she really is a citywide resource that has been really instrumental in our whole community messaging and our Spanish language messaging. She is on Radio Bronco literally daily, and she has developed quite a reputation for the city, representing the city really in the Tri-Counties area. Radio Bronco is one of the most listened to Spanish language media outlets in Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo County. And Liliana is on there literally every day. Lately, what she's been doing is a lot of rumor control. There's a lot of rumors that are out there, and she's been spending a great deal of time, correcting those rumors. But she's working directly with fire, with police, with the city administrator's office, and with Mayor Murillo. But I really want to, highlight the work that she has done. Some other positive things that have occurred, and I know we were talking earlier about the CWPP, and I'll mention that in a moment. So you do know we have our wildfire suppression district. We have broken all records, and I mean not even coming close. We have almost by 50% more chipped more fuel this year because people have been all of our vegetation management efforts in the suppression district, and we attribute this to folks quarantining or isolating at home. So people are not driving into work, they're at home, they're maintaining their yards. Just this year in the San Roque district, we had it budgeted for, I believe, 2 weeks of work, and we got done with 2 weeks. We're not even halfway done. So the good news is, with folks staying home, they've been cutting back a lot of their brush to help in the fire suppression effort this year. So that's kind of the items on COVID. I'll switch to labor items. So one of the things that you probably have seen in the press citywide is, in addition to the 5% across the board budget cut, council through Paul Casey directed us to go back, and most labor groups were due a 2.5% raise on or about July 1st. We've been able to achieve that deferral of raises for everybody except for the firefighters union. We're still working with them. They did agree to put a pause on their raise. They were due a raise July 4th. They have a reopener in their contract for what's called a certification or an education incentive, and we're trying to find a mutually agreeable incentive that doesn't add additional money or cost to the budget in this year. So we're working very closely with labor, trying to get that resolved. Along the same lines, in terms of labor and personnel, since the last time we met, we had a fire academy. We've hired and put through 10 new recruit firefighters. They're out on the floor. We had 7 vacancies, and we're anticipating several retirements in the coming year. So we have all 10 of our new firefighters on the floor. Really an amazing group of just a real testament to the recruitment efforts that we had done. In terms of diversity with the firefighters, about 40% are Hispanic, all male. We tried very hard to recruit female firefighters, and we just didn't get any that successfully completed the process. In terms of personnel, we've also promoted 1 captain and 1 engineer since we last met. So those are the items on our personnel. The next item I want to cover is the Fire Station 7 rebuild. Since we last met, we've run into some challenges on the existing site. And the challenges are several. Obviously, there's some heritage oaks on the site. There is a natural water source that runs through the site, a creek. The site, as you move to the east side of the property, starts to slope down very steeply. And what we found on the site is, on the flat buildable patch, what we didn't know probably 70 or 80 years ago when the station was first built, there are 2 small earthquake fault lines that run underneath that site. Obviously, you do not want to site a public safety building that needs to be survivable after an earthquake directly over a fault line, and it's a small branch of the Mission fault line, but even a small branch that the state architect will not sign off on. So we've been working with the state architect to try to identify exactly. We have a very good idea of where the 2 fault lines lie. In order for us to get an exact identification of where the fault line is, we'd have to spend probably between $100,000 and $150,000 to dig a very deep and long trench. And because there's so many large boulders in the soil, the engineers are not convinced that we're still even going to find the fault lines there. We did get some documentation back from the state architect that basically said, look, if you know kind of the general area where the fault lines are, you can build or site the building 50 feet away from those fault lines. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're actually looking at the property and going, okay, the faults are in these general areas. If we go 50 feet off of these two fault lines, is there still enough buildable space? And so we're working through that piece right now. But I do want to share with you that if, you know, there are a fair amount of constraints that may make it challenging, if not impossible, to build on that site. So there will be more to come on that, and certainly we'll keep the commission informed. In terms of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the first thing I want to say is go to our website. And Commissioner Allman talked about it's on Fire's website. The exact address of that is cwpp.santabarbara.gov. cwpp.santabarbara.gov. Incredibly professional website. We have partnered with DUDAC as our primary consultant on this, technical consultant. Amber Anderson, our wildfire protection expert, as well as Fire Marshal Joe Pori, are leading this team. As you recall, we received a CAL FIRE grant for $310,000. But with that grant came some time restrictions. Normally a CWPP, along with what's called a programmatic environmental impact review, take about 3 years. CAL FIRE said, if you want the money, you got to do it in 2. And this was, of course, before COVID, you know, kind of threw a wrench in everything. So as Commissioner Allman mentioned, we had one public meeting in February, was attended by about 75 folks. A couple council members were there. And then we had a second public meeting scheduled for mid-April. Well, obviously, you know, the world changed the third week in March. We immediately pivoted to an online public meeting, a webinar much like this. We had approximately 50 attendees, and we received in both of those public meetings numerous public comments. We also continue to receive public comments on a daily basis via email or through the CWPP website. Most of the public comments that we're seeing, there are some parcels that were not included in some of the high fire danger areas in the first CWPP, which was done in 2004. With new fire modeling, new fire behavior modeling, new flame length modeling, some of these parcels are directly adjacent to some of the high hazard areas and actually contain enough vegetation or structure that would continue to propagate the flames. So they were included into those areas. I don't have an exact count on the number of parcels, but it's there's a couple areas in town. There's some up in the foothill areas that abut the high and extreme hazard zones, and there's some in the coastal hazard zones which are down in the Mesa area, kind of TV Hill area, that were originally not included, but certainly meet the technical and scientific criteria. The negative public comments that we've gotten to this point is concerns amongst these homeowners who weren't in the high danger area, but still have the hazard around them, but are now included in the high danger area. They're very concerned about their fire insurance rates going up. They're concerned about their home value could potentially go down. So that was one of the items that has come up. We presented the CWPP on Tuesday to the Planning Commission, and it was their first crack at it for them to review and provide us feedback. They provided robust feedback, much along the same lines of what I just described. One of the things that they asked us to do that really CWPPs and programmatic EIR is not designed for an economic impact of what would it do to these homeowners. So we're working through that, and it may be a separate analysis or a separate study that if these homeowners were included in the high or extreme hazard zone, what are the potential impacts to their home insurance, their fire insurance, as well as property values. Public input is what will continue, even though we've passed some of these deadlines and a document is out. It's in a draft format at this time. It is not the final document. The council will adopt the final document late this year to early next year. So there is plenty of time for public comment. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this or any of you commissioners within your network certainly Commissioner Allman through the Fire Safe Council, please get that word out. We have gotten a really robust amount of public comment, and that really helps make this a better plan. I mean, even though we've got the technical piece to it, the plan is really the communities, and it's a source for the community. And the more input we get, the safer we're all going to be. One of the things that I would like to do at our next commission meeting is to bring Fire Marshal Pori and our wildland fire specialist, Amber Anderson, to the commission. And just so they can give you, I'm giving you sort of the fire chief, strategic level. They can certainly get into some of these technical details and answer some very specific questions for you, and really give you opportunities to connect with your constituents. Just again, so we have a much more robust plan. But again, the best place to go for the most updated information, including the draft CWPP, is the city's web address, cwpp.santabarbara.gov. Oh, great, look at that. Matt is on top of it. So there's the website. You get a sense of, sort of how clean and professional it is. The maps are on there. The draft is on there. Opportunities to get involved are on there. And it's really, this is a huge document for the city. I mean, next to sort of the citywide hazard assessment that looks at all hazards, this is probably the next, most, document of importance for the community. All right, the last thing that I want to, the other thing, as Matt cues up the quarterly performance report that I want to share with you, the last thing that I want to share with you is I'm remiss. I know we have talked about having Liliana come to the commission, and I was looking through my notes. I'm struggling to remember what I did the first week of March, just because COVID has been all consuming. So I know we promised that we would bring Liliana to the commission so she can talk about some of the efforts that she's been doing, and we will definitely get that queued up really at your pleasure, Chair, when you'd like us to come back, whether that's next month or the month after. But I do know that I owe you a presentation from Liliana. The last thing that I want to share with you in my report, you're the first ones to see this. I got this late May, but we were still in the midst of COVID. I didn't want to share it until I had an opportunity to share it with you first. I've told you that we adopted a data analysis program when I got here. And this is our first quarterly performance report. This covers January 1 to March 30th. And I will email you a copy of this when we're done, so you have a chance to go through it. But I just want to give you a quick perusal as we go through the document. Matt, if you can go to the next couple pages. It's about 8 pages long. You've got a table of contents on page 2. You've got a note about data validation on page 3. We pull our data from our city CAD system. In the middle there, you have unique incidents just for that quarter, and then we compare it to the quarter from last year. And you'll see that we were slightly slower in this quarter. One of the things that's happened with COVID and emergency response, we've seen a slight decrease, maybe about 10% decrease in our call volume. AMR, the ambulance service, was reporting a 40% decrease in their ambulance call volume, and folks have not been calling 911. They're fearful of either going to the hospital because they're afraid they're going to get COVID in the hospital. And we've seen this nationally. This is not just a Santa Barbara condition. At the bottom of the page, we've got a pie chart there, which just illustrates that, emergency medical calls are in this case, about 3/4 of our total call volume. Moving on to page 4, we have a breakdown of the total number of incidents by month. And you'll see we're fairly steady. We get a little bit busier in certain times, months than others. At the bottom on table 3, we have unit movements. And I just want to say that a unit movement is slightly different than an incident. So an incident might oftentimes require 5 or 6 units. So say like a structure fire, versus a medical aid call might just be 1 unit. So you'll always see more units moving than there are incidents, and that's because some calls just require more than one apparatus. On the next page, we have unique incidents broken down by station. And you'll see that Station 1 and Station 4 are two busiest stations. And then you'll see, some of our stations are much slower. So like Station 8, that's the airport station. So we had 9 calls in that period, and that's, a couple of medical calls, a couple of aircraft standbys. But obviously you need to have fire crash rescue if you're going to run a commercial airport. And then down at the bottom of the page, it just kind of breaks it down with unique incidents by station zone. It's just another way to depict that data. Turning on to page 6, it's unit movements by the specific units. And again, I told you that a unit movement is slightly different than an incident. Moving on to page 7, we have unique incidents by day of week. So anyway, it looks here like some of our busier days tend to be like in January, it was midweek. February, Saturday was the busiest day. And then in March, it was kind of the early to midweek. And then it's broken down at the bottom of that page by just by graphs by day of week. Moving on to the next page, we depict how busy we are by hour. And this is pretty typical that you see on the bar chart at the bottom. So the smaller bars indicate the middle of the night. It's typically the slowest time of day. People are asleep. There aren't a lot of people on the streets. People create calls. So we typically don't have a lot of calls in the middle of the night. This is very common where you see we hit peak call volume typically in the afternoon to evening hours. So we're the busiest, kind of 1 p.m. to 4 and 5 p.m. And that's pretty typical of what you see for most fire departments. And then on the last page is probably the most important page. And if you were to really describe our, one of the ways you measure successful fire department performance, it really is in your times. And so we break this down by a couple of descriptive times. And I'll let you read through this, and certainly, we can ask questions. You can email me individually, call me individually. Just so call processing is the time from when the 911 call is answered in the dispatch center to the time that the dispatcher pushes the send button to alert the firefighters in the fire station or the apparatus that there's a call. Turnout time is the time that the firefighters take from when they're alerted to the call to when wheels start to move on the apparatus and they go en route to the call. Travel time is the time that we're driving from the fire station or wherever we received the call to arrival time. And travel times are pretty interesting. And so you'll see travel times in the city are really reflective of our road network. So, there aren't a whole lot of city streets where you can go very fast. There's a lot of foot traffic, bike traffic. We've got the dips. So our travel times are going to be pretty consistent from month to month, but that's the actual drive time for the apparatus. And then the last one is the total response time. So that is inclusive of turnout time and travel time. So, but does not include the dispatch center time. So that is the first of what will be many future quarterly performance reports. I kind of come from a school of, I'm a bit of a data head. I'm a firm believer if you can't measure your performance, you can't improve it. And so just for an example on the turnout times, now that we started posting turnout times to all the firefighters, and they thought they were super fast getting to the apparatus to get out of stations. And when they saw their actual times, they were like, oh, I didn't know we were that slow. So when you're able to come back into the stations, you'll see we have shot clocks established at the front of the stations that actually start counting up by seconds from when the alert tones go off. And so we've actually seen our turnout times drop by about 30 seconds just because we're tracking it, we're reporting it, and we're actually reporting it down on the granular level to the fire captains on different shifts. So if you're at station 1 on the engine, you can see how busy or how slow you are on A shift compared to B shift or C shift. So it's started this sort of friendly competition between shifts. They're like, geez, I can't believe B shift was faster than us. Come on, let's hustle, let's get out of the station. So, and the firefighters know that we're watching because I've seen crews get out super fast and I'll go back and talk to them. And they're like, oh, we didn't know you were listening. It's like, yeah, I'm listening. We're listening. Good job. Way to go. So that concludes my report. I understand you may have some questions for me, and I'm available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, I thank you very much, Chief Nickel. I'd like to open up the questions to the other commissioners.
No question for you, Chief Nickel. Just always well done. Very thorough and detailed report. I know we really appreciate that. And the more detailed you are, the less questions we need to ask. So,
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question, Chief Nickel. Of the 10 conditional job offers that you presented back in February that were pending medical and psychological exams, how many of those actually started the academy that was scheduled for April 6th?
All 10. Everybody comes.
Wonderful.
And just a breakdown of local kids versus folks from the outside kids. They're in their 20s and 30s. Sorry. I'm going to say about half grew up in Santa Barbara, and about half have come. All of them had a connection to Santa Barbara. The half that didn't grow up in Santa Barbara either went to Westmont or UCSB, so they had a Santa Barbara connection. But we've actually got some really interesting stories. One of our new firefighters was a junior lifeguard, went off to college, became a commercial boat pilot, was basically driving tugboats, and came back and started working back in town with the city's harbor patrol hourly, and then got hired. And when you asked him, when did you want to be a firefighter? And he told this story about when he was a lifeguard working on our beaches, and there was a medical aid on the beach, and he had some sort of really life-changing interaction with our firefighters, and he knew right then and there, I want to be a firefighter. So we've got some really cool stories of some local kids who grew up in town here that are going to make their career serving the community. So it's pretty special.
Very good to hear.
Unmuted.
I have a question.
Okay.
Commissioner Stedman, I think you had the floor first.
Yes, thank you. By the way, is there any feedback coming from this microphone? Okay, good. I just have a simple question, Chief. Where are you?
Where am I?
Yeah, are you in the secret bunker, or where?
No.
What's your location?
I call it Admin West. So my house is about 8 blocks down Chapala from the fire stations, or from the admin. So I'm working remotely today. I'm not.
Got it. Got it. Thanks a lot for cluing us in on some of the health precautions you guys have been taking. You didn't mention anything, so I assume there's no real challenges, knock on wood, in that area.
Well, we're very. I mean, it's one of my highest concerns is keeping my firefighters from contracting COVID. It's a terrible virus, and so we're working extremely hard. I really attribute to Dr. Prostowski and our EMS chief Nails, and really all the firefighters and the captains that are extra hand washing, closing the stations down. We don't even allow family members of firefighters into the station. I mean, it's really an all hands thing, but it's probably our biggest risk.
Right.
Okay,
Thanks,
excuse
Chief.
me just 1 minute. Thank you, Chief Nickel and Commissioner Stedman. I'm going to ask our technical person, Matt Four, why we're experiencing such an echo for questions. Can you help us out on this? Okay, I guess we can just continue then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to figure that out. I think one thing that might be helpful is when you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. So we should have one microphone open at any one time, and that's the person who's actually speaking. Let's try that and see if it works.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Four. Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about the homeless encampments. I know that along the highways and the railroad tracks, there have been a number of fires from encampments. And I'm wondering how you're working with that, if there's a plan to relocate the folks that are living there. I know that we had Project Room Key. I don't know if those folks qualify for that, but is there a plan to create a more safe environment for not only the homeless folks who are vulnerable for catching COVID, but also for our fire dangers?
Chair Daniel, Commissioner Rodriguez, awesome question. We are challenged with this. You've seen a pretty big increase of not only the number of homeless encampment fires, but the size of these encampment fires. County Fire had one last week off of Fairview that burned for about an hour. The challenge that we're up against is in the early days of COVID, some of the best practices, particularly around homeless encampments, coming through public health, was leave the encampments intact. And that was primarily due to the case managers for the homeless folks knew where they could find the folks that they were case managing. We are meeting next Wednesday, a team of Public Works, Fire, Law, and to basically refresh, is this still the current thinking? Because we've not taken really any significant action on some of these homeless encampments due to the public health recommendations around leaving them in place. We still continue to work very closely with Caltrans, as well as the Union Pacific Railroad for the right-of-way. If you see some of these fires that have occurred recently, some of the larger ones, they have occurred on their property, on their lands. So we have a pretty aggressive effort through our fire marshal's office. Chief Poirier and I were just speaking about this on Monday in anticipation of our meeting next week. But we have seen an uptick, and frankly, I'd like to get a handle on this before we get into, kind of the peak fire season. So we're balancing public health and public safety from fires caused by, these homeless encampments. In terms of the folks that are being relocated, I don't have any information on that, although we do work closely with Laura Doubles on that. Hope that answers your question.
I could also add to that, Fire Chief Nichols, Commissioner Rodriguez. So a couple things too. So the Center for Disease Control, especially early on, as Chief Nichols said, that recommended not to displace homeless encampments for the spread of COVID-19 in the community, especially if they're not located where there's a lot of pedestrian or public traffic. However, there have been some locations in other areas like public sidewalks. That's where we've worked with the city attorney's office, the city prosecutor has, as well as Laura Doubles and community development to find housing, to get hotels, to put them in to reduce the spread. We still continue to try to do that. And so this is when it's located more and where there's pedestrian traffic or interactions with the public, higher increase in that. Also, there's a very sensitive issue too, in terms of, we have a policy in place that we drafted in terms of going in terms of homeless encampments and clearing them. The policy is really delicate in terms of getting proper notice and making sure that we store and identify and store any items that have value. It doesn't have to be monetary. It could be driver's license. It could be medical prescriptions. We shouldn't be throwing that away. Caltrans just this week alone paid a $2 million settlement for a lawsuit filed in 2016 for going into these encampments, sweeping them and destroying them. So the city takes a lot of efforts in terms of how we go into these encampments, how we notify them, and then special precautions during COVID-19 as well.
Thank you, Mr. Doimus, for adding that. Are there other questions by the other commissioners?
This is John for the chief. I have a question, or actually a comment. I've been admittedly listening a lot to fire and police communications, and I notice now more of the output from fire dispatch goes on to MDTs, not so much out in, spoken on the radio, but they actually defer to the MDTs. I think that's a good thing. I think it's probably part of the COVID thing too, is to keep quiet about something that might be quite obvious. The other thing is I wanted to talk about cross-boundary responses. I'm listening with county and Montecito and all. We've always done that, but it seems now it's much better and smoother than it's ever been. I mean, it just happens, and I really enjoy seeing that happen. I think it's really cool.
Chair Daniel, Commissioner Allman, yeah, a couple comments to that. First, you hit the nail on the head on what's being routed to the computer terminals in the fire apparatus. Remember I mentioned earlier those COVID screening questions. We're trying to protect patient privacy. We've got some HIPAA guidelines out there that we really don't want to come up on the air where somebody, if you're listening to the dispatch, the address that somebody's going to. And if we come up on the air and say, oh, that person's COVID positive, we just violated their patient privacy rights. So we're routing that information. Quite honestly, we're given some serious consideration about backing off these COVID questions because one of them is, are you short of breath? We treat every call that we're going on as if the patient might have COVID. So we may be backing off, some of that information. But you hit the nail on the head. We're trying to protect patient privacy. The second item is regionalization and boundary drops. The fire chiefs in the south part of the county are 100% on board with this. We want to do it more. We want to do it better. We're actually doing kind of a comprehensive analysis of where all of our calls for service are occurring. It's quite likely, in the next year, you're going to see some pretty substantial changes in some of our responses. And it's based on the premise of send the closest, most appropriate unit, irregardless of the jurisdiction of the call and the jurisdiction of the responding unit. I think if somebody has an emergency that they've got to dial 911 for fire or rescue or emergency medical services, they don't care what color the fire engine is. They don't care what our patch says. They want us there fast. They want us to be professional. And they want us to be kind. So we're really trying to do it from a customer-centric focus to get the quickest unit there. And if we can do that and save 20 or 30 seconds, and if it means I pick up a few more calls, we pick up a few more calls in Montecito and County Fire picks up a few more calls along the Foothill corridor, then I'm all for that. It's kind of interesting, some of the preliminary numbers we've run. It works out at the end of the year that the calls are pretty similar, us going into county and county coming into us. And that's a really ideal situation. So there's not any one entity that's sort of subsidizing somebody else's calls.
Thank you, Chief.
I have a question, Chief Nickel. What is the status right now of Pulsepoint, the app?
Chair Daniel, Commissioners, Pulsepoint is up and running. It's got some interesting quirks to it. We're actually getting, just because of the way dispatches have to go through a secure system to get dispatched to the station, we're getting about a 15-second heads up, 10 to 15-second heads up on like structure fires. So the firefighters will get the alert on their phone in the station that there's a structure fire, and then they'll start moving towards the apparatus, and then the tones will hit the stations. And that's just a quirk of DOJ requires these public safety communications to go through a certain routing that just adds a few seconds to it, whereas Pulsepoint, it doesn't say who's dispatched, it just says structure fired and address, but it is up and working. As far as I know, we do not have any public CPR needed where folks have been involved yet, where there have been, who's been alerted and did they respond type of thing, but it is up and working. You can download it now and choose Santa Barbara City Fire.
Excuse me, Chief Nickel.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said Pulsepoint is up and working. I got a little message that said it was freezing. Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, so Pulsepoint is up and working. You can go download the app right now. I mentioned that there's a little quirk in the system that we're getting some structure fire dispatches about 15 seconds faster than the station alerting, but we're getting out of the station even quicker, but it is working.
Okay, thank you very much. And just on this particular point, because of the recognition that you gave to Liliana for her outstanding job in opening up the communication between our Hispanic speaking community, I'd like to say something which I'll translate into English shortly thereafter. Felicidades, Liliana, por haber hecho un trabajo buenísimo para nuestra comunidad, los ciudadanos que hablan español, y estamos muy agradecidos. And for the rest of you, I said, congratulations to Liliana for a job well done opening the doors of communication to our Spanish-speaking residents, and that we're very grateful. And thank you, Chief Nickel, because you brought her back, and she is a great asset to our community.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, are there any other questions from the commissioners for Chief Nickel? Well, Chief Nickel, thank you very much. We appreciate, we're so glad to hear that the department is doing so well and that you all stay strong and safe and healthy.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay, at this point, let's move on to agenda item number 11, the Police Chief Monthly Report. I believe that we have Captain Alex Altavilla and possibly Lieutenant Sean Hill that will make the presentation today. Is that correct, Laura?
That is correct.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Daniel and members of the commission. Alex Altavilla, captain with the police department here on Chief Luno's behalf. What we would like to go ahead and focus on this afternoon is some of the accountability and transparency initiatives that we've been working on at the request of council and the community as they center around police reform. The chief has assigned a lieutenant full-time to go ahead and identify and develop and implement projects along those lines of accountability and transparency. That lieutenant will be Lieutenant Sean Hill, who is actually my assistant division commander in the criminal investigations division. He is now working under directly with the chief on the chief staff, and I will be running the division directly with my sergeants while Sean can go ahead and work on these projects. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and introduce Lieutenant Sean Hill, and he can take it from here. Go ahead, Sean.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thanks for having me. I'd like to first just extend my appreciation to Battalion Chief Chris Males. I know the Fire Chief mentioned earlier that he was helping a lot of the city employees, and he was was fantastic in our transition into COVID protection for our employees. So I can't thank him enough. That was much appreciated inside our building for sure. As the captain said, in June of this year, Chief Luno created a position to address some of the much needed attention to the changing landscape in the law enforcement in the nation. And a lot of those issues need immediate attention. And I think she recognized that and created this position. And shortly after I was appointed to it, my primary focus is to evaluate and enhance current structures and processes in our department that deal directly with our accountability to the public. And it's also to assess and develop new processes and structures and initiatives related to police accountability. I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. First and foremost, as you have mentioned earlier today, is the kind of evolution of civilian oversight and what that is going to look like in the future in the city of Santa Barbara. I am the liaison to city council and other city employees regarding what our current processes are for professional standards, which is commonly known as internal affairs. And that is our internal investigations of complaints against our employees. I previously held the position of professional standards sergeant, so I've conducted those investigations myself. So I will be lending some of those expertise and information on the inner workings of the police department to City Council and other folks such as yourselves when needed. Other projects that I will be working on that are immediate in nature is reevaluating how we communicate with the public on our website. Certainly there are ways that we can assess and kind of do a evaluation, so to speak, of how the public accesses our website, specifically related to access to complaint forms. I am taking a look at our website and slowly integrating those changes that make it a little bit easier for our public to navigate our website in those areas, and to make sure that we can reach and be accessible to people who find the need. I am doing a professional standards process evaluation, and that is just kind of taking a look at our current process and seeing what ways that we might be able to make it more efficient and transparent and kind of meet the needs of our community in the process. So for example, what that might look like is a little bit more updating and interaction for those who have made a complaint against the police department. So looking at ways that we can make that process more efficient and transparent. Other projects that I'm working on are community accountability in the sense of who we hire. As you're probably aware, in any organization, who you recruit and hire is very significant. And we are looking at ways that we can make that a little more open to the public. For example, we're looking at embedding a community member on our police oral board panel. So for example, when our training and recruitment division holds open entry testing and interviews, we're looking to embed a community member on that oral board panel so they can experience and participate in the interview of our new potential police officers. Other areas that we're looking at is our youth engagement. We also understand that our relationship with our youth is extremely important for a variety of reasons. And we have had partnerships, and we do have partnerships with probation and engagement with programs like Los Spiritos Boys Camp. However, creating meaningful relationships with our youth, not only for the police youth relationship, but for people who might want to be involved and engaged as city employees in the future is really important. So kind of a long-term strategy on engaging our youth to become members of our department and other city departments, quite frankly. So those are kind of a few of the immediate projects that I'm working on. And it has a lot to do with kind of those areas that most of us would find where we are accountable to the public and transparent to the public. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, previous to presenting questions, Captain Altavilla, do you have more that you would like to present to the commission before we open up to discussion?
Chair Daniels and the members of the commission, this is what we wanted to go ahead and focus on. So we had time to answer all your questions because we thought this was definitely on the forefront. So other than this is what we have.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'd like to then open up to the other commissioners question period regarding the presentation.
Hi, Commissioner Rodriguez here. I have a couple questions. Thank you for that update and information, Lieutenant Hill. So as you're reviewing your current structures and policies and developing new ones, have you considered taking feedback, or are you currently receiving input from community? I imagine that things like the website and transparency may look one way internally, but then it might appear different, or the expectations might be different from a civilian perspective.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Rodriguez, thank you for that question. Yes, we are taking information from the public. We have done so in the past, and we constantly look for ways to improve to do that. And I think that's kind of an evolution of how we communicate with the public based on current needs, which have drastically changed recently. I can give you an example and speak to one of the ways that has incorporated itself into policy. Some of the communication we've had with our local community has relied in part on some other larger national movements and projects. One of those that you may or may not be familiar with is the 8 Can't Wait movement, which is a project from Campaign Zero. And I think this is relevant because it does focus on definitely a few, if not more, very poignant issues that seem to be common across the nation with communities and police departments. So in other words, important issues to the people who are policed. So in that, we are addressing and have addressed and incorporated policies relevant to 8 Can't Wait. You'll see shortly that I will be putting out on social media kind of a response, so the majority of the public in our website, so the majority of the public can really get access to how we look in the realm or arena of 8 Can't Wait. But I will verbally go over that right now so you can get a sense of it. 8 Can't Wait is speaking specifically to policies. It's talking about 8 areas that are generally incorporated into policy that people involved in this particular campaign want to see happen. And so I'll go through them one at a time. One of them is to ban what are called chokeholds and strangleholds. And please forgive me, but I'm going to use language from 8 Can't Wait. It doesn't always match our specific policy language, but I think it gets the point across and it addresses how the community is speaking to us. So the chokehold and stranglehold prohibition, you probably are aware that has been prohibited by the chief of police and has already incorporated it into our policy. Another area would be de-escalation, and that is how our officers, whenever possible, try to diffuse situations, slow down rapidly evolving situations with the intention to avoid further crisis or harm to anybody, whether it be the community member or the officer. And oftentimes that means diffusing the possibility of uses of force. De-escalation is required by our policy. So that's the second one, and both of those are required. There's another policy as part of 8 Can't Wait, which is the duty to intervene or the duty to intercede. And that applies toward situations and circumstances where a police officer, a sworn member of our department, might see another police officer engaged in what they believe to be a policy violation specific to use of force, but not only to use of force. So that requires us as police officers to intervene when we think there's a harm being done in a violation of a policy by another member of our department. That is also required by our department. A fourth component of 8 Can't Wait is prohibition of shooting at moving vehicles. And I will say that that shooting at moving vehicles is not absolutely prohibited, but it's permitted when the officer believes that there's no other reasonable means to avert a threat. And I'll give you an idea of what that means and why that component of the policy is still very relevant. We have seen recently when we're speaking about active shooters, oftentimes or sometimes have gone mobile in vehicles. In fact, we felt that locally. And there are times when we need our officers to avert a threat when someone's in a moving vehicle. I think the point of this policy is that we try to mitigate that possibility at all costs. Early on, when these policy discussions started, it often had to do with police officers in front of vehicles that were charging at them and whether they were required to move out of the way or not. So we're looking at, in our policy, it is permitted, again, when there's no other reasonable means to avert a threat. The fifth component, or a fifth component of 8 Can't Wait, is comprehensive reporting, especially use of force reporting, and that is required in our policy. We have extensive reporting. All uses of force are required within our policy, and we also report the certain segment of those state required uses of force to the state as well. So not only do our employees report them to our management and executive staff, which are all reviewed. We also report many of those to the state for a statewide database for data tracking and analysis. Another component, or a sixth component of A Can't Wait, is requirement of a warning before a shooting. That is required by our policy when feasible, and that is heavily guided by U.S. Supreme Court case law. So we rely on the objectable, reasonable standard of case law when talking about a warning before shooting. So it is required when feasible. There is another component, exhaust all alternatives before shooting. And again, our policy requires our officers to use the force that only appears reasonably necessary. And our policy also requires de-escalation and other alternatives to higher level of force when possible. So our policy requires our officers, whenever possible, to use alternatives to higher levels of force. And finally, the eighth component of this would be a requirement of what's called a use of force continuum. We do not currently have a use of force continuum, and I'll speak to that. A continuum is not new. They have been around a long time. They were formerly popular and fell out of favor a little bit, if I could use that phrase, for a lot of legal reasons. And when I say continuum, the most common representation of that, if you could visualize a ladder, and then the lowest step on the ladder would be a low-level use of force. For example, an officer's just mere presence and command presence. And then as you go up higher in the ladder, it would be an elevated use of force all the way up until lethal force. Oftentimes, continuums provide a mistaken perception that officers have to take every step in that ladder until they get to lethal force. And that is contradictory to the dynamic reality that they might not have the opportunity to take all those steps. For example, if they are presented with a person with a gun, a lethal force circumstance immediately, they don't have time and can't be expected to start with the command presence. Oftentimes they'll have to respond to the actions taken by the person that they're engaged with. So that is kind of an overview of A Can't Wait. And like I said, I am working on putting that out more publicly and transparent so that everyone can see where we stand with Campaign Zero's project.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the update. So it sounds like the one of the main critiques of groups like Campaign Zero and the police scorecard is the use of force continuum. And it sounds like that might be outdated language or outdated methods, and it's more like a matrix or rubrics, if you would. What I did notice also on the police scorecard is they're using data from 2016 to 2018. They're gathering this data from the California Department of Justice Open Justice Database, UCR, and the California Monthly Database for Arrests and Citation Register. So I'm wondering if that reporting mechanism is done annually, is it done weekly, monthly? Do you know how that information is being reported to those different entities?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Rodriguez, you did mention several different reporting mechanisms. I think the overarching one to the DOJ is an annual report when we're talking about especially like UCR type reporting. I can't speak to Campaign Zero's data collection processes. There are many nonprofits and other organizations similar that report the information that they have. It's not always accurate, and they're not part of our state kind of reporting requirement, so to speak. But certainly, it's important. This is another reason why it's important for us to have a really user-friendly, up-to-date website so that our local community can seek local information from us and the city, as opposed to potentially relying on people outside of our state that might not have direct access to our most current policies.
Thank you again, Lieutenant Hill. I think this is such an important matter to address, and I'm really happy to hear that the chief appointed a position, a full-time position to address this. I think looking at what's taking place nationally, it's difficult sometimes to separate local experience and national experience. And for folks who are living within the margins of the community, I think when there's national events that are taking place on camera, one can't help but feel intimidated and scared and threatened. So I really do appreciate and commend the department that they're taking the step and making the commitment to update this information. I think this will help our community feel more comfortable with and more confident and safe with our department. So I really appreciate the efforts. Thank you.
And also on that note, I'd like to add, Lieutenant Hill, that we have a lot to be very thankful for in the behavior that the department has represented over the last few months in light of all of these very complicated issues. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions at this time? I actually have a question for Captain Altavilla. Changing the subject slightly, more than slightly. You did lose your canine back, Officer Lombardi's dog. And at the time, I know that his family was, grieving the loss of their also family pet. Has a new canine been purchased for the department? And will Officer Lombardi be the person responsible for the training?
Chair Daniel, members of the commission, and Lieutenant Hill can correct me on this, but I believe we do have a new canine. I'm not sure exactly what the name is, and I believe that it did go to the officer.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome our new member of the department by the commission, please.
We will.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
I just had one, Chair Daniel, if you don't mind. Lieutenant Hill, I'm just curious. I'm happy to hear that there are all of these new policy implementations coming in to make things safer, not only for our officers, but for the community. But with that, what I'm really curious about is how often do officers go through remedial training? Is that something that is going to ramp up with this as well? Coming from a military background, what I find to really be the missing gap here is you can put a lot of stuff on paper, but if you're not practicing those things regularly, then that's no good, right? And the last thing that I want to do is be in a situation where the police department is doing what seems to be the right things, but then if officers fall short of that just because they're not getting the training that they need, that kind of puts us and the community in a bad situation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Peck, and thank you for your service, by the way. Absolutely, I think you really pointed out an important component that we in law enforcement for sure realize. And, in times where there are difficult budget decisions to be made and calls for defunding and other things, that's something that we're paying close attention to. Fairly recently, I think last year, probably, I don't have a specific date, we recognized the need for difficulty in getting our officers to training, and our training and recruitment section of the department started to create a larger group of internal training cadres. In other words, they took the approach to start to make a lot of our people in our department experts so that they can have more in-house training. So there are several cadres of trainers that have gone to schools and are continuing to go to schools so that we have more accessibility internally as these financial difficulties arise, because we do recognize, as you said, you can write a policy and that doesn't necessarily have the impact that it could have if the employees aren't trained, if our officers aren't trained. Our officers are really enjoy getting the continued education and the training. And it's a constant effort to try to get them that. So I would say that to address that, we have created internal training cadres, and we continue to invest in them to make sure that we have access, at least internally, to training.
Thank you for that, Lieutenant Hill. One last follow-up. I appreciate everything that you've said so far, and same thing to Captain Alex. I'm just curious because a lot of times the human side of fire, police, and first responders can get lost. So I would just like to know, what's the morale, what's the feel like in the department nowadays? How are y'all doing?
It's a challenging time in law enforcement, I think, for everybody. At first, I'd like to just kind of acknowledge that I think it's hard for everybody right now with the COVID epidemic. But certainly, I would say that the men and women of this department are feeling the challenges nationwide. They take this home. They take a lot of pride in what they do. It is our identity, just as a doctor relates to the view of a doctor all throughout their life. We go home and we're still police officers, and I think that they carry a pretty heavy burden during these challenging times. But we continue to move forward, and we look and rely on the support from our community, and we'll move forward. These men and women have been rolling their sleeves up and getting the job done night and day, regardless of whether people are watching or not, and they will continue to do that. And certainly look forward to support when it can be given, and we understand and are empathetic to the difficulties that our nation's facing right now, and we're not obstructionists to change, for sure. We're in the game, so to speak. So I appreciate you recognizing and asking that. But yeah, they're carrying their career and moving forward the best they can.
Rob.
Yes, Lieutenant Hill, I'd like to also say that it's very unfortunate that our first responders, our police officers, our firefighters, in light of a few bad apples, that many of the dedicated, honest, hardworking members of all these departments have taken a blow. And when they take the oath, as you said, it's a lifestyle, it's a commitment. And so it's very unfortunate that it has tarnished years of many people's dedicated service to protecting our citizens and our community.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Commissioner Stedman?
Yes. By the way, great questions, Commissioner Peck. I appreciate what you're asking, Lieutenant Hill. I too served as a naval officer for 10 years. So I have some idea of the rigor and discipline that's required to fill a uniformed role. But my question is this: another aspect of morale, to extend Max's question. In town, I've run into police officers who don't live in this county, right? And so now we're monitoring COVID and all the numbers and our capacity every day, county by county, and policies differ. So is there any impact from officers that don't live in Santa Barbara County coming into Santa Barbara County to work in terms of any threat to the department's health, either on an individual level or force-wide?
Madam Chair, Chairman Stedman, thank you, and also thank you for your service to our country. I will say that, again, Battalion Chief Males provided extraordinary above and beyond service to the employees of this department and helped implement, along with Captain Arroyo, a in-depth and robust safety protocol for our department. I think I'm aware that many other agencies adopted the practices that were developed here that were very innovative. So I would say that because of those early exhaustive and robust measures that were put in place, we were in a very good position. And I feel like that if it could have been done, it was done here at this department to keep them safe. So we're very aware of the different county approaches and processes and procedures that can play a role when you talk about testing and other things. But I would say that we not only survived, but even potentially thrived in a really bad situation because of the efforts and the teamwork between the fire department and the police department.
Excellent. That increases my confidence because we haven't really heard a lot about it, but I did run into one police officer specifically. I don't know his last name, but his name is Lou, and he lives in Orange County. And he said he basically commutes up here like a few times a week, which is admirable in itself. But that got me thinking about the possibility of like what that number really is in the department. So I appreciate your answer.
Can I just add something in response, I think, to Chair Daniel's statement of bad apples? I think it's important when we're looking at police reform that it's not about bad apples. It's about a system that has historically oppressed communities of color and other marginalized communities. Police reform is not about saying that an officer is a good person or a bad person. It's about looking at policies that have adversely affected certain community members or certain community groups. So with that said, I do feel proud of the efforts that have been made in the last few years at the Santa Barbara Police Department. But I think when we're looking and we're talking about these issues, we want to really take away the person involved and look at it more of a policy, because that's what needs to be changed. Is how do we create policy or amend policy that has an equal response for all community members?
Well, Commissioner Rodriguez, I would tend to, on some levels, disagree with you. I think our departments, not all police departments, I do believe that the Santa Barbara Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, have had policies focusing on dealing with the community unilaterally, not affecting one area differently than the other. I think those policies are in place. I think policies can always be improved, without a doubt. And I think there needs to be focus so that similar circumstances don't occur, to ensure the protection of all the individuals in all of our different communities that fall under the city of Santa Barbara's umbrella. That's my opinion about the approach that our department is making. We are never above reproach or improvement. And I think we can all improve. So on that note, would you like to make another statement?
Well, I think you and I are saying the same thing, that we're agreeing that we're proud of what our local department is doing. What I'm offering is that when we're talking about police reform, we're not talking about one or two individual officers, but we're talking about the structure in place. And I think that's why it's really important that that there is a full-time position appointed to look at these policies and to look at the structures that are in place and to see what can be amended so that it does equally affect all community members. I'm not by no means criticizing our local department. I'm just offering a different way to describe the changes that need to be made nationally and locally.
We do agree.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Rodriguez, thank you for those comments. I consider them both supportive, and using the trauma-informed approach that I believe in, I acknowledge many perspectives from people in our community. So I appreciate both of your comments.
Okay, on that note, is there any other statement or comment by a commissioner? And I have to confess that my computer battery is getting low. No? Okay, thank you very much, Captain Altavilla and Lieutenant Hill. We appreciate both of your participations in this first online Fire and Police Commission. So I'm going to now, unless there's other comments from the commissioners, I'm going to move on to the adjournment. But before I do, I would like to once again encourage members of our community to participate at our next meeting, which will be held next month. Hopefully the glitches that we have encountered during this meeting will all be worked out, some of the echoes, etc. And then thanks to Chief Nickel for his report, and also Mr. Doimus, and then two unseen people. We have both Matt Four from the City Administrative Office and Vince Wang, if I'm saying it right, for his training all of us so that we could provide the community with this presentation, participating in our meeting. And then also to both Laura, Chief Leno's assistant who's run this meeting, and Carol Lupo, who is Chief Nichols' assistant. Without your work and your help, this would not have been possible. So thank you very much. And also thank you to my other commissioners. I am delighted that we've been able to get together and meet and hold this meeting and to create more transparency for this wonderful Santa Barbara community. So thank you. And on that note, I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second? Okay, from Commissioner Rodriguez. And we will see you all next month, hopefully.
Very good. Good seeing you all.
Goodbye, everyone.
Laura?
Goodbye. We're all set.
Bye, guys.